I'm super excited to have my guest, Jenny Rios, with me today. Jenny, thanks for being a guest on the Profit Builder blog.
My pleasure.
So today, Jenny is going to be talking with us about how do you navigate a situation where, as a contractor, you get an incomplete, let's say, set of plans from an architect or a designer that you now have to bid against or build against. And how do you navigate that process with a homeowner in a way that lets you and them have a win, but lets there be responsibility shared across all parties involved. And before I jump in, though, Jenny and I have known each other for a bunch of years. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself here in a second. But she is one of the most experienced and qualified people to speak on the topic of project management and effective project management and client relationships. She is very good in communication, and she's very detailed in the way that she approaches how to navigate and manage a project so that it creates a huge success on both sides for everybody. So Jenny, I'm super excited to have you here, but will you tell people a bit about you and what you do and your background, and then we'll kind of launch into my questions.
Sure. So thanks for having me. A little bit about my background. I studied architecture. I'm a licensed architect. I am a certified construction manager. I sort of earned my stripes in public contracting, building schools for over a decade. I learned a lot in construction management and public contracting. And then in 2014, I went and worked. I decided I wanted to move to private residential, but I wasn't really sure if I would like it. So I took a chance and went and worked at Meadows Heap Pelsinger Builders, and I learned a ton more. And I was there for 3 years and working as their general manager the last 2 years. And I was really struggling with how to navigate this problem of incomplete drawings without, as a general contractor, I realized very quickly, like, that's the basis of our business, is having relationships with architects. So you can't be like, oh, the drawings are garbage, we can't work with this. Like, that's just not an option. So I really grappled with it and talked with my estimators and my whole team, and was just like, we have got to come up with a tool that puts us on the right side of the table with, the rest of the team, specifically the design team and the client. And I don't want to be coming back later with, all of these surprises and being the unpopular person telling clients that their allowances are way above what we originally put in their budget. So I slowly, over time it happened, but it kind of came true when I decided we would do signal pricing, is what we called it, is where we would color code costs based on their ability to be known or fixed. And so I'll explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about Jenny, for you guys, that you're gonna get so much from here today. One of the things I love about you is that you see a problem and then you go, okay, what's the source of that problem? Like, because problems show up here, and then your brain goes, what's the source of that problem? And what can we put in place at the source of where that problem happens in order to not have that problem happen here, which is what we all need when we're faced with reoccurring breakdowns. Because I hear this all the time from contractors of, I've got an architect or a set of plans that is incomplete, and I've got a homeowner who's kind of pushing on the architect about not wanting their fees to be too high. And then so it goes to the general contractor, who has to bid it sort of incomplete and not completely flushed out, or a homeowner who hasn't made the decision. And then there's always, as you say, that challenge of, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus to say, well, you didn't, or point any fingers. And I love that what you did is you looked at the problem and you said, how do I get in front of the problem and get in control of the situation as best as I can as a contractor, to ensure that that problem doesn't turn into my having to ask for more money or having these like unexpected surprises that nobody likes as the project goes on. So I love the way that you think about that. And So let me just ask you a question. So what do you see are the best ways a contractor can handle an incomplete set of design plans? What's your, and I know you started to talk about this, but yeah, like what's your strategy for that? What did you figure out back then when you were at
Well, the trend at that time, and I don't know how it's evolved since, I can't imagine it's completely resolved itself. But the trend was that we would get, like schematic or very, design development plans, nothing close to a construction set of plans. I mean, clients just didn't have the patience or the appetite to just pay those design fees to get a complete set of plans. Very few clients, as recent as last year. So I said, all right, well, we have to have a tool to solve the root cause of the problem, not the symptom later after the fact. Let's identify the areas that we know, and then we can all feel good about those areas. Let's identify the areas that we're pretty sure we have an understanding of where they're going, but with a few more questions answered, it will go from assumptions to like known costs, and we would highlight that as yellow, and then red or orange, depending on how you feel. I always think red is a little alarming, so I was like, let's use orange. But orange is just my polite way of saying this scope is currently undefined or incomplete, one or the other. It either needs an owner decision or it needs more detail. And now we're talking about a very specific thing, and I always start with the big and move to the small. So when we go like, what are the big numbers that are in a complete budget? We start with the big numbers, make sure we understand that scope of work as in as much detail as we can, and then move to the smaller things. But I just saw so many trends of like all these allowances in there, and the allowances were generally, as a builder, I recognize you're in a tough spot, because if you show it too high, like what you think it's going to be, you may not get the job, because then you're like too honest about, well, this is what I think the designer and architect wants, is a really highly labor intensive customized detail that more than likely the architect wants and the owner wants. If I put in the real number, I might not get the job.
Isn't that interesting? I just want to pause just for a second here, because I hear this a lot too, that there's that thing of, I have a sense of what the total amount's going to be, or even though the full scope isn't in there, I'm going to put the full scope in there. And this happens for generals and subcontractors, that then I'm like thinking I'm being efficient, whereas everybody else is like, I am just going to put a price based on what's on the plans, even though I know that scope is going to expand. So I hear what you're saying about that whole thing of it's this fine line of, well, am I not going to get the job because it was such a big number that was undefined? Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry. I think that's an important point of what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, the estimator's job is the hardest, right? If he or she overbids a project, they may not win the work. They underbid, you lose money. So it's a lose-lose. So I just wanted to get in front of that and say, what information would we need, or what questions? Like, let's ask higher quality questions. What are the questions that need to be asked in order to get to the answer that's going to be a fair number and that's going to make everyone. So then you're having a really constructive conversation with your architect and design team and owner, and be like, well, if you're thinking about it in this way, this detail, then you're having a more constructive intellectual conversation, instead of, I'm pretty sure you want it to be a lot more than what I haven't carried in the budget.
So you have a strategy for being able to educate people about that in a way that helps the contractor have that conversation with the homeowner, that educates them about like what really is the potential full scope here without the homeowner running out the door. So what is that process that you do?
Well, I'm a big proponent of just, I'd rather be, what is that saying? I'd rather be hurt by your honesty than charmed by your lies. Like,
Ooh,
I'd rather be super honest up front and just say, this is what we're talking about. Like, it may not be popular, but this is what we're talking about, and I'm here to be part of the solution. So let's roll up our sleeves and figure it out. And so it changes the communication, and the whole tone of that conversation becomes much more interesting to me and much more collaborative, and it feels more like partnering than adversarial. And that's a much better place to come from, not just professionally, but just in it, like I feel much better about waking up every day and partnering with my teams.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about your tool a little bit, will you? Because what
Sure.
saying is this tool that you have, that you can have these conversations at the front end, that have these more collaborative conversations, let there be more honesty and more revealing clarity for everybody about what's really happening or what the potential happening is on a project. So can you just describe that process? And
Sure. So as we develop a budget, we start with very conceptual cost of square foot type conceptual budget, but then you move into a level of detail for every project that goes by the different CSI divisions and the cost codes. And so I just ask that each division or each cost code get color coded into green, yellow, or orange. So green means it's a visual representation of, we understand this scope of work, we're clear, we know what we're building, no questions, we can move on. Yellow means we're like 80% there, but not quite. We just want to fine tune and make sure we understand our assumptions are correct. Maybe it's not provided in the drawings, but we've talked about it and these are our assumptions. So in theory, it should be easy to get from yellow to green. And then orange is, as I mentioned, is undefined or incomplete. And that means we've got work to do. That means we've got some decisions to make. We've got some design to complete. We probably have a bunch of research and questions to answer. And so then we're like doing that. So for each of the categories, I color code those. And then of course I provide an executive summary of like, what percentage of this budget is green, yellow, and orange?
Yeah.
So then I'm like, now as an owner, I understand my risk, right? I understand like, well, 50% of it is known. That's probably good. 20% of it is yellow. We can move that into, now I've got something to work with. But if 80% of my budget is orange, we have work to do.
So how do you navigate? Because there's some people could perceive that as, here's my CYA document. And you have a completely different approach to it, which is, how do you create shared responsibility with the homeowner and the architect in that document, so that it's not just, here, I'm going to give this to you and let you know where you're short or where you have to make decisions. How do you get the rest of the team to take ownership and responsibility and shared responsibility for sort of the condition, if you will, of that scope of work?
But then the very next step is to collectively, as a team and with the owner, decide which are the line items that are most meaningful to the project and to us. Like, what do we collectively agree are the line items that we want to get from orange to yellow or green? And we can decide on those. And we might be totally comfortable going to contract with some amount of the budget being orange. But then we're all on the same page, eyes wide open, super cognizant of what we're doing, and we have a plan that we're working towards. So if we pick 4 or 5 line items that are really tricky, we're going to say, we're going to put our effort towards these 5 line items, and we're going to do our best to resolve these things that are complex and will also ideally help the construction move faster if we make these decisions. But as you know, a builder can only build as fast as he or she knows what she's building.
Right. Yeah. And the more you know, the less time you're going to take to do it. Because otherwise you're making it up as you go along, right?
Yeah.
So do you get agreement from the homeowner and the architect about that shared responsibility at the time that you're having that conversation? Because I think that agreement thing is such an important piece of us having or holding accountability for ourselves.
It's super important. Otherwise you get into this, right? And it's like, oh, it's not me, it's you. It's not you, it's me. And like, it really needs to be lock eyes, like, we agree, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I know that you're gonna share this tool with which is awesome. I really appreciate that. I'm sure that people get a lot of value out of it. Can you just describe the tool a little bit that you use, that you're sharing with people, that helps them navigate this process? So I understand the orange, what did you say? Orange, yellow, and green. But how does that tool, how can a contractor use that tool?
So it's a basic spreadsheet that's organized by the CSI codes, cost codes. And then it just has like a pre-format, it's a template so that you can color code it. And then it has an executive summary top sheet that kind of shows the delineation of where the costs fall, or and the idea is that it develops over time. So it's not going to stay exactly the same. It's going to develop hopefully over not too long, hopefully over a couple months before it goes to contract. But then when you're in pre-construction, now you've got a tool where you can actually actively like have a conversation about specific line items and then take it to the next level.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's great. And it's very generous of you to share it with people here on the video. So thank you. I will put a link down here at the bottom where people can get that. And Jenny, can you just share with people what's the best way that they can get a hold of you if they have questions or they want to find out more about what you do?
Sure. I guess email is probably the easiest. It's Jenny with a Y, Jenny@jennyrios.com.
Great. Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks again for being here. Hey, make sure if you're listening, download this great resource that Jenny has shared with you. Even if you're a subcontractor, there's probably a way that you could use this tool and modify it for yourself. So again, Jenny, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Always like to help.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I hope you found today's video helpful. If you're ready to take your next step in your leadership journey and to build a great contracting business, I encourage you to check out my book, The Profit Bleed. It's full of great tools and resources that will help you implement the processes and the systems and the structure that will allow you to build a more profitable business, allow you to work less hours, and help you reclaim the joy and fun in your business and in your life again.